Hi, I'm Doug Magyari from IMMY, and this panel is about the hardware and software considerations for the enterprise wearable applications. We have a fantastic group of guys here today who have an amazing amount of years behind AR and VR. We'll just get started here. Oscar, would you start by introducing yourself, and then maybe Dennis, you can go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Doug. Hello, everyone. My name is Oscar Antunez. I am currently a reliability engineer at Abbvie Pharmaceuticals and their headquarters here in Illinois. I've been using remote assistance, remote technology for about 2 years, but my background comes in engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer, been doing this for 13 years. Also, I have been involved in mostly manufacturing. This time around, I'm in utilities facilities. So that's where I would be sharing my knowledge from going forward from the facilities and utilities area.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dennis Dawe. I am currently the Global Operations Director for CBRE on the RSA account. Prior to that, I was a subject matter expert in several fields on CBRE's technical services platform, which is where I ran pilots on VR and AR. Hiren?
Hi everyone, my name is Hiren Bhinde. I am the head of product management for AR and VR at Qualcomm. I've been with Qualcomm for about 16 years now, and I was one of the co-founding members of the VR and AR teams at Qualcomm. So the last 5 years, we've scaled the teams to a pretty good size and have also seen the launches of some world-class mobile standalone products, which includes the Google dating devices, the Oculus Go, the Oculus Quest, and very recently the Oculus Quest 2. Over the past 5 years, I've also seen how VR and AR have played a strong role in not only consumer-based devices, but are also making a very strong need and dent in the enterprise world. I'm very excited to be a part of this panel and looking forward to chat with all of you.
Ratnadeep, you want to introduce yourself here?
Yeah, hi. This is Ratnadeep, and I work in GE Global Research Center. I've been working on VR and AR research since 2014. I joined GE Research in 2013. So since 2014, I've been working on various applications of VR and AR for industrial and enterprise use cases. And I'm happy to be part of this panel.
All right, great, thank you. Ratnadeep, why don't we start with you? You know, you're at General Electric, coming out of research and trying to get into applied applications. From your perspective, what do you think the future of AR and VR looks like in enterprise, especially in manufacturing operations at GE?
Yeah, so AR and VR, particularly AR, has a lot of potential in manufacturing applications. I can name on top of my head like some of them. So for example, toolpath planning and visualization. So we do a lot of complex machining of complex geometries, and sometimes it's difficult to visualize where the tool will follow on the part, because as you know, when you do a simulation and when you get the actual part or the raw stock, those two are completely different. So having some sort of visual guidance, a 3D in contextual guidance is very important. Another use case would be asset tracking, tracking of work in progress parts, assembled parts, components over the as it flows through the shop floor, and environmental health and safety, like the safety of our workers using AR and wearables. That's another area that I think is another area that we see a lot of potential, where AR can definitely help. And then another area that's very close to my heart, because I originally came from a design background, is that interface between design engineering and manufacturing engineering. So typically what happens, and anyone who has worked in manufacturing knows that there's a vast disconnect between what the design engineers think a part, when they design a part should look, and what the manufacturing engineers actually create. And that handoff of designs to the manufacturing engineers, that's a pain point that we're trying to solve using AR. So imagine you are sitting, right now what happens is the design engineers, they send drawings or 3D models, but then the manufacturing engineers, they have to see it on a 2D flat screen, which is not, so it does not give all the information that's required. So you can imagine, instead of that, you are sitting in a room where you are actually visualizing the part and the changes in the part when through a AR headset, it's basically visualized on a tabletop. So that's a use case that we are actively investing in. But again, there are some very unique challenges in all of these use cases, and maybe we can touch upon that later in the discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Hey, Oscar. As far as the use cases go from your operations and what you're up to, would you touch base on that a bit, and maybe what technology you've tried to apply, and perhaps even add to that what some of the challenges that you're finding at the shop floor? There's a lot of them. If you wouldn't mind touching on some of that.
Sure. Just to get everyone gets an idea of where the different applications that we have at Abbvie. Back in 2018, the business solution team started rolling testing. Now they went out there and looked for what companies can we partner up with to provide a solution that would be able to be scaled up across different areas of within our groups, internally within Abbvie. We have manufacturing R&D labs. So it was like, so who could take advantage of that technology? So they were doing earlier testing in 2018, and they brought our group in, which is in central services, like I mentioned earlier, facility and utilities groups. They brought us in and said, this is the technology we tested. We have this wearable technologies that we're going to implement across the industry across Abbvie. What do you guys think? Is there any business cases for you to use them in your area? What are your thoughts? So we, at that point, we did look at a couple wearables. We said, like, yeah, it makes sense to bring them up aboard, especially on the maintenance side, maintenance reliability area. How can we utilize this technology and kickstart, maybe do some training? There's a lot of challenges coming up ahead that we foresaw. So we're like, let's take advantage and do a pilot for our areas. So I took the role of being a reliability engineer, not having a lot of knowledge on the wearable technology. I did some research, and we came to EWTS in 2018 and saw a lot of really nice technology, useful technology we could take over and start with our technicians. Some of the wearable devices that our IT or business solutions had showed us were some of the issues were they're too small. The screen to look at documents, it would be a challenge. So we said, okay, we like the technology. What can we use? What can we have? What kind of wearable can be used that is not project a big screen? So we looked at a couple of them. We brought a couple on site to test. We were able to get funding for 3 wearable technologies to use in our areas. One of the main things that I personally thought that we could get value from and show the return of investment was training. So I'm also a supervisor for a planning group. We plan all the work in the maintenance world. So somebody has an issue with heating and cooling in their office, they put a work order in. We get the information, our planners get the information, and then they have to plan based on what the issue is, order parts. They have to go out there to the field, look at those systems, and say, what do we need? So there's a big process behind it. And having like in some of the expertise, we said, well, what can I use? We have this wearable technology now. What are the advantages I can have out of it for my team, my planning team? So we were thinking out of the box. We were like, what about training remotely instead of using to see what I see technology to call like an expert and troubleshoot? Like, what do we call somebody that knows the planning process, has done it for a long period of time, and they could train our planner, a new planner coming on board with that technology instead of having to fly them out to another state, do the training, and then have a one-on-one with a contractor coming in and do on-site training, having it for a couple of days, a couple hours a week. That cost could add up. I think we were looking at maybe $40,000 to train someone in my group if we went that route. So we said, let's look at the glasses. We partnered up with a remote a contractor company that they were willing to test out the technology with us. And we used that technology to train one of my new planners coming on board to do the overall, get the basic knowledge. And he had somebody on the field. So as an example, we had a failure on one of our systems. The planner would put the glasses on, we go out to the field, call the contractor that we hired. He was on call, like, okay, I'm looking at this piece of equipment. Help me walk me through what do I need to look for? What are the safety issues that could arise for performing this job? What kind of parts should I be ordering for this repair? So all that knowledge was being shared through the wearable technology. So we did like that. The planners, like one of the planners that was piloting this program for us, loved the idea. So we were able to bring that over and add more technology to more wearables to our business case.
Great use. What kind of challenges did you run into from a practical standpoint in trying to see how you could use that in a larger scale kind of way?
One of the challenges, the challenge was the Wi-Fi connectivity. They're being in the building. Think of our buildings as a university campus or hospital buildings. We have a lot of dead spots, and we also have a lot of usage from computers, the labs, the R&D labs. So it was hard to get a good, consistent streaming of data or wireless to our wearables. So that was one of the biggest complaints from my user that tried all the glasses. The other issue was comfort level. I mean, we can only use them for the ones that we were trying out, maybe an hour and a half, and then they felt heavy. Then the other ones were, like I mentioned, they're too little for them to see, so he couldn't see from the little glass what the SME was projecting to him, and it was a challenge for him. And the other thing that I would say was also a big challenge for them was the safety aspect, working in being in an environment, manufacturing, building, even if it's a building area, you're walking through a lot of pieces of equipment. And so you have to be really careful of where you look, and are the glasses compatible with ANSI's requirements for safety protection. So those three, I would say, were the main issues that came out of that pilot, and we're still trying to struggle to figure some of them out.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. That's great, Oscar. Hiren, since you have such a remarkable background and work with everybody, maybe you could pick up on from your perspective what's differentiating enterprise VR and AR from, let's say, commercial XR stuff, and then also what you see as really the fundamental needs to see this stuff accelerate into greater adoption.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you're asking me the question after we've heard from Ratnadeep and Oscar and Dennis. I can share how this whole thing comes together and how we at Qualcomm need to think of these end use cases that each of the gentlemen just shared. So first of all, from a product success metric, what really comes to is, would you be able to, is this product functional? And can you wear this product for a long time? And as we heard about training and being out in the field or being out in a warehouse or being out in the factory, the ability to wear a device for a long time without the device getting really hot becomes like the fundamental need of the device. So we do look into how bright the augmented characters are going to be, like a chalk-like use case that a PTC Vuforia provides, on a RealWear or a HoloLens-like device is only successful if you're able to wear it for a long time. The longevity of the device, and the device should not get hot. People are concerned keeping these kind of devices in the right near your ears for a long time because sometimes it gets heated up. Having something right near your eyes builds a completely different kind of concern. So when we at Qualcomm are designing not only our semiconductors and chipsets, which are our bread and butter, but also reference devices, the blueprint devices that we need to work with partners like other folks on this call, this becomes a key success criteria. Now, if I pull this back and to your question about how do I see this differently from an end consumer device to the enterprise space, there are a few different metrics that we need to look at. If we just look at VR devices today in the end consumer space, like an Oculus Go, an Oculus Quest, or even the Daydream Lenovo devices, are mostly what's called as gaming devices.
Sure.
There's a lot of productivity applications, there's a lot of social engagement applications like Oculus venues. But the key use case today is also there's a lot of gaming. Gaming is usually like an hour to 2 hours. It needs to run at a certain time. Again, your device does not need to be to get hot, but the visual clarity is important. However, on the VR in the enterprise side, it's mostly education, it's mostly training. So the ability to watch videos or be in an immersive environment where you're a wannabe medical student and you're learning how to do surgery. You're a wannabe teacher and you're learning how to train and interact with virtual students. Those kind of applications are not as concerned about visual clarity. I wouldn't say visual clarity, but the visual fidelity and richness of the graphics, as much as they're concerned about the interactivity with the virtual world. Can you see my hands? Am I able to use controllers for the virtual avatar to be seen properly? As well as just voice authentication, the ability to use voice in an effective virtual way. So those factors come into place in VR. In AR, the enterprise applications like remote assistance, training, everything that we just heard from Dennis, Oscar, and Ratnadeep require a few different things. One is that in a in an enterprise play, the devices need to be worn for a longer period of time, but need to be extremely comfortable. In a consumer side, they have to be much more lighter, just like the glasses you and Dennis are wearing. And as we've heard from multiple different companies who are working on these projects for the future, we are a few years away from that, but that is the end goal. I'd like to end the thought process here by saying that there are a lot of technical challenges in terms of display, the field of view, the resolution, the richness of the quality, which forms the foundational of an AR experience. But also what becomes important is if you have that right in front of your eye, there are other aspects of how much space in front of my eyes, how much of the field of view should I be able to cover? Do I have the whole virtual world because I need to interact with the real world? How good the interactions can be? Can I use hand tracking and gestures to interact with the world, and how effective those are? Those are the kind of challenges that we're trying to solve along with our partners, be it the big cloud companies who are working on this or other technology partners like Ultraleap and hand tracking to help these end use cases be much more seamless. Because what you heard from Dennis and Oscar and Ratnadeep were not technical challenges, were but how we want to use the device. Today, we never talk about this phone becoming hot, but just about, hey, let me just click on this app and call a cab to pick me up to go to the airport, right? But 10 years ago, the conversations were also around the launch application is not working that fast. The cameras are not coming up that fast. So I think we are in a similar state with VR.
Thank you very much. With your view, to the extent that you're able to speak, what do you see from a timeline where a lot of these issues are getting at least to semi-practical or more efficient type answers and solutions?
I think if I specifically pinpoint in AR, not VR, just specific to AR, I do think that the enterprise space in AR is going to lead the consumer space, and the applications are going to be slightly different. On the enterprise side, over the next 2 to 3 years, we will see lighter devices with slightly more bigger field of view. And we will also see a lot of these devices, instead of being like helmets and standalone devices, also have a lot of connectivity being used to the phone. So you would have a phone or a puck or a remote box sitting in your pocket, and then a lighter glass so that the end use cases for a long time. A similar split architecture strategy is going to be used for end consumers. We see companies like Nreal Light, who are already making glasses that look like yours, slightly bigger, and they can be connected to the phone wired to a phone today, and the ability to use the phone to launch 2D applications, to have the browser right in front of your eyes, to have social media applications or video browsing applications right in front of your eyes, or a 3D space right in front of your eyes, today connected to a phone via a USB cable. The next step would be the cable gets cut off and the phone will be connected to the glasses. And after that, eventually we see that the north pole of these devices is just going to have glasses like you guys are wearing, having a much bigger field of view, connected to 5G. And as you walk down the streets, just the ability to say, hey, Google, find the nearest coffee shop. I want to have a latte.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Oscar, what, as far as, seeing the technology in your area, what do you see as what, might be able to get this to move at a faster pace, or what are the major roadblockers to get past pilots?
Yeah, Ratnadeep, you made some really good comments in regards to the challenges that we see as users. The way I look at this from the pilot that we've done is I'm looking at cultural versus technology. Those two things have an impact on how fast we can develop or roll out technology out to the field. So if I go on the cultural aspect, we did projects. So one of the tips that I got was start small. Get the technology, bring it out here, start small, get some buy-in from some of the users that are going to end users. But even then, if you don't have the right technology, you can have the buy-in, but then they get frustrated. And that's one of the things that I found in my group, that we had some of the buy-in, not 100%, but from the users, I picked a small group. All right, we're going to use the technology, but then the technology had a lot of glitches. Like Ratnadeep was saying, one is the software, connecting to the software. Then I found, internal support. If I can't get it to work, who do I contact? It takes a long time. I want to use it tomorrow, but by the time I get a program, I have to be on the waiting list. It could take a month before I can even get them to use in our field. Then he takes them to the field. They work for 3 days, and then they die again. Then I have to contact their internal team. So it's a challenge when you don't have some kind of technology that you could just go like a phone and download it or program it yourself. I think that's lacking right now. I don't know if there are any other software wearable technologies out there that has fixed that issue, but if we could get that taken care of, the end user or applicability will be faster. So it'll lead to adapting at a much faster pace. The other aspect is the cultural part. I saw a lot of the year in 2019 when I started rolling this out to my team. There was a lot of, like I mentioned, buy-in. We're getting rolling out. We're being proactive. We're going out there showcasing the technology. Then it started dying off at the end 2019, 2020. I was getting a lot of pushback as to, I can do this. I can do this with my phone. Why do I need wearable technology? Why do I need something that's gonna be heavy in my eyes, block my field of vision? If I could just go out to the field, I could use FaceTime. What's the difference between FaceTime and wearable technology? The other things I've gotten is, why can I use a GoPro? GoPro camera, is that the same thing as a wearable? Can I just go out there and walk around in field of vision? We bought the HoloLens also. I haven't been able to use it. It's sitting down in my office. and I the HoloLens 2 came out, so now I'm sitting with outdated technology, or upper leadership allowed us to make that purchase, but I can't do anything with it. I want to use it. We're commissioning a new building out in San Francisco. I wanted to use it there to go do 3D mapping, getting that training for new technicians that are going to be going out there and maintaining that equipment. I still can't use it. It's just sitting there in my desk. A lot of the stuff has to do, with the culture of technology. Interestingly enough, with COVID, it brought a change in part of the culture part. Now they're seeing, a lot of the things that I was talking and showing that we could use when it came to remote assistance training. Now they're starting to see like other groups, other areas, labs, R&D. They're like, well, you know what? We could use that technology now. So now it's starting to pick up because they know it's how hard it is to go on, fly out to Singapore, fly out to Italy. So we could use the technology now, but still, is it going to be continuous going forward? We need to have that cultural change, that technology change to be able to go forward and make these things fast moving. If we want to continue to push this products across our groups here in Abbvie.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So, Dennis, if you wanted to continue with that, a little bit, I know you've got quite a lot of experience in that regard, and then maybe give us a glimpse of what you kind of see, maybe 10 years or 20 years out kind of view of, but maybe, stay with where we are today and what needs to get fixed.
Right. Well, the way I look at it, I'm going to date myself here. But I was in the industry when buildings went from standalone to building automation packages. So one of the very first buildings I showed up at, everything was run manual. There was no control system. There was maybe some pneumatics, no DDC, very, very Stone Age. And I like to think that we're somewhere near that in that kind of evolution with AR, where it applies to FM and actually the just as an offering. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, but as this panel can attest, cool stuff and making it work, we're not there yet. And some of these things come at some pretty hefty price points for not being there yet. The road ahead, is great. There's some very forthright people thinking way out of the box, and it's possible, but like anything else, we've got to first bulletproof it. We've got to get this stuff to work effectively. We've got to solve Oscar's problem. I mean, I had the same problem Oscar mentioned. Is great idea, be able to take this expert with you on your phone or your tablet and go down to that lower level pump room in that new pump that you've never seen before. Let's call Bob in Peoria, because he works on them all the time, and you get down there and there's no bars. So you can't make a call. You don't have wireless. These are things that we've got to fill in the infrastructure. I mean, I was thrilled in my career. I went from a manually operated steam building to what was at the time called a Powers Insight 11, Power 600 building automation package. So I went from, the oldest part of the industry to cutting edge, and it was great, but it came with a lot of issues as well. It was new technology. If you look at it now, you can control your building from your phone 2 continents over, which 25 years ago you could barely conceive of controlling it from within the building from what they called a computer. A lot of people didn't think computers were going to be on a desk. I worked with some very old engineers who said that we're never going to run a building from that little contraption on his desk. And look where we are today. You can pick up your phone, like I said, change the temperature in a building in Singapore if you want. I see AR having to make that metamorphosis, and part of it is getting the price point where it's no longer considered, and I've heard this over and over again, a toy, and help it find its place in manufacturing, in R&D, in pharma, in all of in FM, in commercial real estate. It's got to go from being a toy to being a useful product that everyone has to have, and it's got the abilities. It's we've got to build up the infrastructure around it. The buildings have to be a little smarter, and they're getting there. I mean, little by little, we're building now. The buildings that are being created now are 1,000 times smarter than things created 90 years ago, 70 years ago, 50 years
Sure.
ago. The other part that I see going forward is, and I'd like to see 20 years from now, is AR integrating with building automation systems. You're doing a walkthrough, and all of a sudden you walk past a chiller or a boiler that's got an issue, and maybe you don't want to run all the way back to your alarms or your control panel or your operator workstation. I see it actually pinging your phone. Hey, that chiller is over revved, or oil low on chiller 3, or flame failure boiler 2, and to actually be a tool in your toolbox. You'd be able to walk over with your tablet and go near the chiller or the pump and get real-time information from your building automation system, not just trending, but actual real data. Wow, this pump it's starving. Why is it? You wouldn't know that. You'd go up and look at the pump, you'd hear a weird noise. Now you got to go back and verify it on a building automation system. Whereas this would be a take along of your building automation system. And that's where I'd like to see it go. I just like building automation. It's going to get there. It's just a matter of when and how much pain we all have to go through to get it there.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. So, Hiren, as far as the various OSs that are in these systems, and really looking at the enterprise side as opposed to the consumer side, are you seeing that OS is going to matter, and kind of the hows and whys around from your viewpoint of what is needed there?
Absolutely. I do think that OS is going to play a pretty standard and significant role in the next 5 to 6 years. In the last 4 years, where we've seen all these devices come out, some of the non-Microsoft or the non-HoloLens AR devices have been based off Android. And that is also because most of the chipsets that have been, these end device manufacturers have worked with companies like Qualcomm or anybody else. Most of these companies have been working on these chipsets, which were smartphone-driven chipsets or tablet-driven chipsets, where Android was the default OS. Now, bringing up an OS and getting all the middleware and frameworks to work does take a long time. And so it was more about, hey, this market's small, let's use what we have, let's use the chipsets that we have, let's use the OS that we have, turn some knobs, do some chiseling here and there, and then make it work for the devices. But as time goes forward, given that the devices have to become lighter, smaller, the chipset itself has to become lighter, smaller, but at high performance, low power, the memories also have to get smaller. Because the memories have to get smaller, the OS that sits on the software stack that sits on it has to become much lighter. Android, which started 12 years ago, which is a phenomenal operating system, but was custom for this device. However, for a device that sits on in front of our eyes and on our head, is something where we will need a lightweight operating system. I do strongly believe that Linux is going to play a very strong role. I do see that some of my partner companies, or Qualcomm's partner companies, as well as us, thinking down those lines that, we have a very strong market for some of these other big VR devices where Android is still useful, but for AR devices, maybe Linux and a lightweight OS is the only way to go. It also helps, it will take some time though for this whole thing to evolve, because any company that's developing glasses will have to also develop not only an application layer on top of that, but to Ratnadeep's earlier point, and even Oscar's, the way you interact with this virtual world is going to be very different. We saw that the early iOS and Android devices changed the way we used to interact with this device, on how you do a touchscreen here, as opposed to just pushing buttons that the old RIM devices, the BlackBerry devices used to have. Interfacing with the world around you as a whole desktop where you could have any application sitting anywhere, and the ability to move it anywhere in space and interact anywhere in space is going to provide a bigger sort of challenge as well. So the whole drivers, middleware, application layer, the whole OS, and this user interface is going to be one of the biggest things that these companies will have to solve over the next few years.
Yeah, I see. You think that, going back to a Linux kind of kernel start is going to be give it the foundation? I mean, that is where Android came from, right? But you think it can be built lighter and kind of a reset on it and be able to get us there?
Yes, because I think, I mean, as I said, Android, which is such an amazing operating system, trying to take that OS and make changes to it or cut things off to make it suitable to an AR glass is going to be next to impossible. Instead of that, if you just take a brand base Linux OS and start adding only what you need, you're going to be able to make a much lighter OS, which is going to be needed. And I do think that that would be the most preferred way. Also for many companies who want to independently own their own OS going in the future, rather than having any dependency on any third-party external company.
Yeah, I see. Oscar, I got a quick question for you. From your perspective, what do you see? How would you get to an ROI? What do you think is necessary? You're talking about getting kind of a cultural buy-in and seeing the hardware, get better. Is there any way in the near future of actually seeing an ROI, or is it going to do these things that are still, kind of early on need to get solved before we can get there? And Dennis, in the FM world, I'd like to kind of get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think as far as the ROI, there's different ways you could categorize it, and that's been the challenge. When I talk to several peers in other areas, it's how do you really quantify the ROI from this the technology? You can use it. I know for our pilot was where the business internal Abbvie team started rolling them out. They were using one business case where they're doing remote assistance instead of having to pay for somebody else to come in and fly and fix the issue. To have a technician call them out and then they walk through the problem. So you can get those ROIs. Same thing with my ROI, where the training, cost avoidance kind of thing, where I don't have to pay for somebody to fly out here. You get those, but in the big picture, I don't know if we're ready to say that there's a big value to have the technology on board yet. I don't think we're there because all the issues that everyone in the team has brought up, those are things need to be corrected, or we need to find one quick, easy solution that would work in multiple applications for us to get a good idea of the ROI going forward.
Okay. Dennis, what do you see on that?
I'll chime in on that. I agree with Oscar. Part of the difficulty is quantifying where is the ROI. In my world, I see it several places. One of them is very hard to quantify, which would be the cost savings from institutional knowledge capture. As older employees retire, there's knowledge walking out of buildings that we don't capture, and we basically start from scratch training new technicians on a system that someone's worked on for 10 years that could easily teach others. That's a little harder to quantify, but how the area I'm looking at from a ROI standpoint, showing the most reward would definitely be in remote assistance and remote diagnostics. That's an easier, Oscar's a little harder. It's harder for Oscar's world because they're first party. They're doing their own work. Whereas in the FM world, if you're a second party provider or third party provider, you're already charging for a service. This is an additional layer of service that you can offer. Not everyone has to be fully, completely an expert on everything. If you've got an expert, an eye in the sky somewhere. That needs to be vetted, but I see that as a avenue in the future that AR can be used pretty heavily in remote assistance.
Yeah. So you think that a good business case might come sooner than later in that particular application?
I think in that one area, yes, and it would be easier to show return that you don't. Again, the other to touch on another point Oscar made, training. I don't have to fly someone to California to do a training session when it could be done remotely by one person, and 13 people across the country in 12 different locations can be involved in it. There's that portion of it too. You could trim your travel budget, your rotation out of office, tied up doing other things, waiting for planes, waiting for buses and trains and rental cars. There's that portion of it too. But by and large, I think the business case to be made is the remote assistance, remote diagnostics.
Mm-hmm. So Ratnadeep, I know you're working on the research and development side, but I'm sure you're also being charged with, the practicalities of being able to get to an ROI. So if you could chime in on that, and then perhaps we don't have much time left here, but if you could, if there's something else that you'd like to add, but please on the ROI side, if you would.
So for better or worse, since I work in research, I don't have to prove ROI. But what do I have to prove out is whether it can be done, the concept of the feasibility. So because as you can imagine, like we have some very unique products and services that we work on. There are only 3 aerospace manufacturers in the whole world. There are only 3 gas product, like gas turbine manufacturers in the whole world. So we don't have a whole lot of you can just go to the market and just buy a off-the-shelf solution that will work. So our problem comes in that, okay, so let's say we see on the news that Singapore Airlines has done something using AR, and one of our executives sees that and says, "Hey, Ratnadeep, can it work on our use case?" So we have to then come and say, okay, so this is the HoloLens or this is the device. Okay, this is the application. How and do we use a web-based solution? Do we use app-based? Do we use phone? Do we use headset? Like, so all of those things are come into the question. For us, what we do is that we have to prove out the concept, but yes, we also have to think about the return on investment. So when we think of solution, we have to keep that in mind, that it can be scaled out. We can't be doing $1 million solution for a problem that solves only $10,000 or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So in that case, yeah, we have to keep that, and that actually goes back to my previous comment that there is a wild west out there of service providers that are out there, and if you see some of the money that they charge to create solutions, that will never work in an industrial company such as ours. Maybe to work for Hollywood kind of like movie where they need to have really good visual effects and all those things. We are not at that level. Like we are basically penny pinchers. Like we have to think of how can you reduce the cost. That's the first thing. Like we can't be creating solutions that increases the cost.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's like our basics where we start. But I think I have less pressure on ROI as compared to Oscar or Dennis.
Yeah.
And I know we are out of time, but so that maybe this is my last comment before I give the mic back to you. So there are 3 things that I want to quickly touch upon. One is, I think Oscar mentioned this, the cultural aspect of using AR. That's, I think, it's more difficult hump to overcome than the technical aspect. So for example, just yesterday and today, I came to know from different experts in our, like, they're not AR experts, but they're experts in their respective fields. One expert said that AR is already a proven solution. That's one person said. The other person said that AR is still 5 to 10 years down the line. So how do you balance those completely two different viewpoints, right? So, and in a company like GE, we have people on the other side, on mostly who are saying that it is 5 or 10 years down the line. So we have to kind of work with them and make sure that they are on board for any solution. From the technical side, I think there are two things that I forgot to mention. One is especially for AR, the polygon count. I don't know how do I put it. Like, so the size, the file size of the parts that we have to visualize. Like, we are visualizing turbine models, we are visualizing jet engine models. They have a lot of meshes. They have a lot of tessellation. It's very difficult to visualize all of those, and so that kind of brings us. We kind of lose some of equity when you go and talk to our end users. If they say, "Oh, you're only going to see like very tessellated models of a model," it doesn't make sense to them. And the other part that I think is critical for, at least for AR, for our solution, is we need to have very good tracking solutions, the tracking for real-time objects. So the AR basically means, when we define AR in GE, we are talking about we are overlaying information on actual objects, right? So unless you know where the actual object is located, I can't believe I'm saying this. In 2018, when I was a panel speaker in EWTS, I said exactly the same thing, that unless we know where the real objects are located, and you can imagine it's a very difficult problem, because we are working with parts that are as small as that fits on your palm, to parts or tools that are like room size, right? So obviously, we know that there is no one solution that fits all, but that's something that we personally are actively working on. When I say personally, like our team is actively working on. But I think that's one of the areas that I think people are not putting too much effort, I think, and I feel that's something that needs to be solved for AR to really go forward.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in this today. And now we'll be able to take on a few questions and answers.